America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation, and today we are joined by Diana Furchtgott-Roth. Diana is the director of the Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment at Heritage Foundation. Recently, the EPA, with Diana's involvement under President Trump, announced plans to repeal the Obama-Biden-era endangerment finding on greenhouse gases, a policy long used to justify Green New Deal proposals. Diana, welcome to Main Street Matters. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine, and it's so kind of you to have me on your show. I just want to say, as a matter of accuracy, when the EPA decided to reconsider the endangerment finding, it was not with my involvement. Perhaps they read some of the papers that I've written over the past year or so, but I'm not part of the administration. I just want to make that clear.
Great. Thank you so much for the clarification.
Sure.
Very interesting subject, though, that I think is really important to talk about. So I'm glad you could be here today.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
It's absolutely fascinating, and not just for the United States, Elaine, because throughout the world, there's this net zero movement, and Europe has it. They're trying to impose it on countries in Latin America and Africa, and it's all based on the finding that greenhouse gases endanger human health. So if they don't endanger human health, quite a lot of what these policymakers are working on would not be valid at all. The premise would not be valid anymore. And that's why it's so interesting.
Absolutely. We could probably find a lot of areas in government that would fit, right? Well, tell us in terms of what the finding is, what the endangerment finding is, and why it matters so much, not just for Americans and people all over the world, but, we work a lot with small businesses. So obviously this impacts costs as well. So can you talk in terms of how it impacts everyday ordinary Americans as well as small businesses?
Sure, yes. Well, I don't want to go through the whole legal background, but basically the Supreme Court and EPA decided in 2009 that greenhouse gases were a pollutant. The Supreme Court gave EPA permission to say that greenhouse gases were a pollutant, endangered human health. EPA decided this, and from this, there have been a whole series of regulations trying to reduce these greenhouse gases. The most notable is there's CO2, which is found in our carbonated drinks, carbon dioxide. There's also methane, which comes in animal matter. There's water vapor. So these greenhouse gases, they don't necessarily endanger human health on the globe, but the idea is that they rise up in the atmosphere and causes effects that endanger human health. So there's been a great push to reduce these greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. And that is one of the origins of the corporate average fuel economy standards, the standards for cars, where you can see when you buy a car that it goes a certain amount of miles per gallon. And the Environmental Protection Agency and the Transportation Department have worked together over the years to raise this standard, not to save people money on gasoline, but because it supposedly endangers human health. Similarly, for power plants, there's been an effort to reduce their CO2 emissions in various ways. And these CO2 emissions are different from the particles that are thrown out by coal, which might be soot. It's something you can see. It's maybe a layer of grime that you can find on your car. These are completely invisible. They don't cause asthma or coughing, but the idea is that they warm the earth. That's the theory. So the 2009 finding was based on data from 2007, but since then we have more data to show that these effects are not as serious as was once thought. It's open to debate, and that's why EPA has issued a power plant rule reconsidering the endangerment finding. The Transportation Department has issued a new corporate average fuel economy rule reconsidering the endangerment finding.
Well, I mean, the Trump administration is saying that the EPA overstepped its legal authority with this finding. How do you think, how does this change the regulatory environment for Main Street when you see this kind of change?
So what it would do is it would make it easier for Main Street to have lower electricity prices and a wider choice of vehicles. Under President Biden, automobile companies had to have a large share of their cars produced be electric by 2032. That would mean that electric cars would be less expensive than they should be to encourage people to buy them. And the SUVs, pickup trucks, sedans would be relatively more expensive. So that would increase the price of vehicles for most Americans. And already you can see that electric vehicles with the tax credits were taken by people in the top fifth of the income quintile. So EVs are already basically a luxury item, but the idea was everyone would have to buy them, even if it wasn't as a second car the way they're mostly sold right now. So that would have increased the price of transportation. I don't know if you've ever driven past a construction site, Elaine, or just looked at the cars near the construction site. When I drive past construction sites, I like to see what kind of cars are there. And they tend to be beat up pickup trucks, beat up SUVs, an occasional sedan. You don't see electric vehicles generally near construction sites because construction workers, they drive in these old vehicles. Making everybody buy an EV would be very expensive for them. And also small businesses and farmers, they don't have the time to stop for a couple of hours every day in the middle of the day and charge up their vehicle. So it's inconvenient for some people who need to use their cars every day, especially for business where they have to carry large loads, to go electric. So by rolling back the endangerment finding, this would take off the pressure from these car companies, rather than saying they have to make a certain share of electric vehicles, or they have to make a certain share of cars that go a lot of miles per gallon. These car companies would be able to make whatever car people wanted to buy, just like other companies can make whatever vacuum cleaner people want to buy, whatever smartphone people want to buy. Restaurants can offer whatever meals people want to buy. They don't have to offer a certain share of healthy meals and a certain share of meals that have maybe extra fat or donuts, for example. They can offer whatever people want to buy. So it's really a revolutionary concept in the automobile industry, and it should have been like that all along. So this would be a big improvement for Americans in terms of their transportation costs. And in terms of electricity costs, the endangerment finding was propelling EPA to require power plants to use a certain share of renewables. And that raises the price of electricity because you have to have two systems. It's as though I say to you, Elaine, I'm going to give you a beautiful car. I'm going to give you a beautiful Cadillac, but you can only drive it during the day. And you might say, but Diana, I have to drive at night. I say, too bad, Elaine. This car only drives during the day. It's free, but only during the day. At night, you've got to buy another Cadillac. You might say, but that's 2 sets of oil changes, 2 sets of emissions tests, 2 sets of gasoline fill-ups, 2 sets of insurance payments. I say, too bad, that's just the way it is. It's like that with renewables. Wind and solar are free, but they only operate at certain times of the day. you have to have a backup. And just as it would be better for you just to have one car that you would drive all the time, it's easier to have a natural gas power plant that runs continuously than a natural gas power plant that turns on and off when the wind blows or doesn't blow, or when you don't have enough solar panels, or when your renewables get too low. And investors too, you don't really want to invest in a natural gas power plant if it can only go 4 or 5 hours a day. You want to invest in one that produces natural gas 24 hours a day, because that way you get more money, you get more return from your investment. So it doesn't make any sense having two systems. We want dispatchable power. That means power that works 24/7 for us. And that's one thing that we are going to be freer to do if we are not hobbled by this endangerment finding and we don't have the requirements to have the renewables. You know, we were going to have a perfect storm in the 1930s if President Biden's plans had gone as they were laid out, because the car companies would have been producing a certain share of their cars as electric, and then the power plants would have actually had to close down if they did not bury 90% of their carbon emissions. So if they didn't bury about 90% of their CO2, and we don't have the technology to do that yet. I mean, CO2, it's like taking the bubbles out of your Coca-Cola and putting it in a big silo down in the ground and making sure it doesn't get out and it doesn't explode. That's what it's like. And if anyone has done a Mentos and Coke experiment where the whole thing fizzes up, I mean, you don't want it fizzing up, basically, if it's underground. So power plants would have had to close down. We would have had more electric vehicles. The electric vehicles, of course, use more electricity at the same time as electricity rates would have gone up because the power plants closed down. And it's really the perfect storm. And what was really amazing to me is that EPA put out its electric vehicle regulation. It put out its power plant regulation. But these two regulations did not mention each other. The power plant regulation requiring the power plants to close down didn't mention, oh, by the way, there's going to be all these more electric vehicles on the road. And the electric vehicle regulation didn't mention, oh, hey, there's this other rule that's going to make electricity more expensive for people who need to charge up their EVs. But now that these two rules have been basically liberalized, they've been thrown out, they're not going to happen. This is really good news for people who drive, for people who use electricity. And that's basically all of us.
Yeah, I didn't know about the power plant side of this issue, but I certainly was aware of the mandate on moving to, I want to say it was like 60% of the fleet was going to have to move to EV, but I'd have to.
Right, exactly. No, that's right. Yes.
Significant.
Yes.
And what I knew, although I'm not an expert in this area, but what I knew was that our power grid couldn't handle that kind of increase at the rate that it had to increase.
Right.
And so the thing that I was thinking of is under that scenario, and now that I understand the power plant side of the mandate, you could almost envision rationing of power for cars and somebody being the government, deciding who was most important to drive to work. Do you get to drive on Mondays or Wednesdays, or this is not your week to drive to work because you don't get power for your car? I mean, those are the types of things and the scenarios that we were envisioning, is just rationing power and deciding who was most important to get to work, or issues like that, because the reality was there wasn't going to be enough resources to power that kind of fleet, all being EV.
Exactly, yes. And the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation has warned about blackouts in the United States. So there would also have been blackouts in people's homes. And you could see this in California. There was a bill that would have required any vehicle sold in California after 2035 be required to be able to not just charge from the grid, but give its power back to the grid. It would be reversible. So if you had a blackout in your house, you would be able to plug something into your car battery and have your house operate off your car battery. And it's only a small step from saying that the state can claim the energy in the car battery for other things also, saying, well, now we're going to take your charge out of your battery and we're going to use it for our own purposes. They're basically admitting that they were going to have problems producing electricity to operate people's homes with this bill. There are a couple of cars that can do that, but not all of them. But they were going to prohibit sales of cars in California that did not have this ability to give power back to the grid. So it's very troubling when our government admits that it won't have enough power for people's transportation or people's home life. And you can see this in once rich countries such as South Africa. They have something called load shedding, where they tell people in advance how many hours that day they will not have power to enable them to plan. So they wake up and they see they won't have power between 2 and 4, or between 4 and 6, or between 2 and 6. And they have to, if they have an elevator up to their apartment, they won't be able to use the elevator, they won't be able to use computers, they won't be able to cook, and they're supposed to orient their activities around this load shedding, as it's called. And in a country such as South Africa, with plentiful resources, a lot of coal, it just shows the breakdown of the electricity production. And part of it is because of the focus on renewables. Why renewables? Because people think that these greenhouse gases harm the climate. But really, I mean, there's 2 points about this. First of all, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change models have shown that if America stops using all fossil fuels right away, it makes a difference of only 0.2 degrees centigrade to temperatures in 2100. And if Europe does it, it's 0.1 degree centigrade by the year 2100. Makes almost no difference what we do here. And why? Because China, India, the rest of Asia, they're not following us. They are increasing their emissions of greenhouse gases. China is building 2 coal-fired power plants a week, and it's using this coal-fired power to produce the wind turbines, the electric vehicles, the solar panels that it wants the West to buy, and that left-wing organizations want all of us to use. It doesn't make any difference. If we take our energy-intensive manufacturing, we move it over to China, where it's made in a dirtier way, the emissions still go up in the air. We might as well just have them here in the United States, where we can employ our own people, where we can have a vibrant manufacturing sector, and do it with lower emissions. Because with natural gas, we have reduced our emissions significantly over the past 15 years.
This load shedding that you're talking about, and going back to the power plant mandate side of it, what I've read is there are power companies around the country that are beginning to move their customers. This is hard to explain, but move their customers to almost like a different rate level plan. So if you use so many kilowatts a day, but you go above a certain threshold, the per kilowatt amount will increase. If you go, they're going to set thresholds. And I'm wondering, do you know if the change in the endangerment finding on the power plants, will that change how power plants are moving because of that? Because the costs, they won't have the multi-tier systems of costs.
That's a great question. And individual utilities in different states are allowed to do what they want. That's why we have 50 different states. We can see 9 out of the top 10 in prices, headed by 32 cents a kilowatt hour in California. They require renewables. 9 out of the bottom 10 in price, with Louisiana and Utah being the bottom at 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's about a 3-to-1 ratio, do not require renewables. And you can see that different states have different methods. Florida had very low electricity rates because it imported natural gas, even though it didn't have its own natural gas. So states are free to have the system you like, the multi-tiered system, but they can do whatever system they want to have. And I'm sure just as we see high taxes cause people to move from one state to another, we've seen an increase in Florida and the Southeast and Texas and a decrease in California and New York and Illinois. We'll also see people move to where there is the best provision of electricity. And there's all kinds of questions. Do you have an elderly person in your home that needs to be hooked up to an oxygen machine? That requires extra electricity. Are there exemptions for that? Would a six-person family have the same threshold as a two-person family or a single living in that same house? So it's really difficult when you start to ration. And interestingly enough, the AI centers have brought energy and electricity to the front of the stage. People are saying we need enough electricity for AI in order to keep up with the Chinese. But really, we need enough electricity for all of us all the time. It's just the focus with the AI and keeping up with the Chinese has put it in everyone's radar screen. But really, we have an abundance of energy. We are, the North American electricity platform that's Mexico, Canada, the United States. We're the largest oil and natural gas producer in the world right now. We beat Saudi Arabia. And there's no reason to have rationing. We have energy abundance. We have hundreds of years of natural gas under our feet. And we need to be using it for the benefit of our people, to be creating jobs and reducing poverty.
So what are the next steps? Are there expected legal challenges, and do you foresee this holding up in court?
Well, the comments have been filed on the Transportation Department and the EPA regulations. Now these agencies are considering these comments. They have to produce a final rule. And then, yes, you're right, it is going to be challenged. It'll move through the courts till it gets to the Supreme Court. And I believe that in the Supreme Court, it will hold up because there are a lot of data to show that greenhouse gases do not endanger human health. People say the seas are rising. Well, the seas have been rising for 20,000 years. It's not true that we have more hurricanes or more wildfires. We had hotter temperatures back in the 1930s. And it's said that higher temperatures are bad for human health, but more people die in cold months than in warm months. You know how when it's spring, we go outside, we say, isn't it nice that it's warm again? Okay, well, there's a reason for that. People are healthier in the warm. They prefer summer to winter. You find that seniors move to where it's warmer, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, places like that. So a lot of what was thought, the data in 2007 for the endangerment finding, just doesn't hold up. And people are saying hurricanes cause more damage. Well, that's because instead of building a $50,000 house on the coast of Florida, the way someone might have done in 1970, now someone would build a $5 million house. So the same hurricane comes along. Instead of knocking down the $50,000 house, it knocks down the $5 million house. So it does $5 million of damage instead of 50,000. But it doesn't mean it's a more intense hurricane or that this is caused by greenhouse gases or global warming. So a lot of it is exaggerated. And yes, I'm not denying that we have warming. We do have warming, but the question is, how much are humans causing? We've even, you can even look at water levels in the Nile going back thousands of years because the pharaohs kept records of water levels in the Nile. You can see they've been going up and down for millennia.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, Diana, I think we could probably talk for 3 more hours on this issue. And it's very, very fascinating. Can you tell everyone where they can find out more about what you're working on and more about Heritage?
Sure. Well, our website is heritage.org. You can go to my name on the website. You can go to policy areas. You can look at climate, and all our papers on climate are on there. You can go to energy. All our energy papers are on there also. They're all available for everybody to see. My colleague Kevin Dyer-Ratner edited a book of papers called Cooling the Climate Hysteria, Separating Fact from Fiction. Those are all on our website, all those papers, with graphs of hurricanes, tornadoes, sea levels, discussions of temperature increases. Did you know that if you put a thermometer in a rural area, a series of temperature changes. There are lower temperature changes in rural areas because urban areas are getting more dense. So part of what we're picking up with warming is a heat urbanization effect. And when you put the weather gauges in rural areas, you get warming, but it's less of an effect. So we have a paper on that.
Oh, interesting. I some of that sounds logical to me, but I'd be very interested in reading something like that. Well, Diana, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street
Sure.
Matters, America's Small Business
Absolutely.
Megaphone.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be on the show.
Well, good. I'm glad. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.